Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're just working through a couple of technical issues with
Some technical
connectivity.
difficulties. Yeah.
Okay. And Cameron here, she's having a little bit of connective issues, but we're gonna try to go ahead and and get the ball rolling here. All right, Cameron, I think your connection is decent right now if you want to start with the intro.
Let me see if new location, if that helps. All right. Okay. Heather, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Sorry for that delay there. I have horrible internet in the office that I work in, uh, warehouse. So bear with me. Jump in if I cut out anymore, but we are because I don't want to hold anybody up. I just want to say thank you guys for all being here. I know it's a Thursday. We're getting towards the end of the week. Obviously, it's the last day of July, so give it up for yourselves for making it this far. Um, but the first thing I want to do is just kind of talk a little bit about July being Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, also known as BB Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, and what is it, right? It's observed in July to bring attention to mental health disparities faced by racial and ethnic minority communities in the U.S. It was officially established in 2008 by the U.S. Congress after advocacy efforts led by B.B. Moore Campbell, who is a renowned author and mental health advocate. So, who was B.B. Moore, right? She was a Black author, a journalist, and a mental health champion. She co founded NAMI Urban Los Angeles and worked tirelessly to raise awareness of mental illness in Black and underrepresented communities. She did pass away in 2006, and the observance was named in her honor. So why does this matter, right? Why do we bring light to it? BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, often experience higher rates of mental health stigma, limited access to culturally competent care, discrimination and systemic barriers in healthcare. And obviously, these factors contribute to worse mental health outcomes, higher levels of misdiagnosis, and underutilization of services that are available. That leads obviously into the disparities because if we're underutilizing those services, right, we're going to see disparities in service numbers. So Black and African American adults are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health issues than white adults, but they are less likely to receive treatment. Latinx communities are less likely to receive mental health compared to non-Hispanic whites, 34% versus 45%. And Native and Indigenous people experience the highest rates of suicide of any racial ethnic group in the U.S. And Asian Americans have the lowest help-seeking rate of any racial ethnic group. So really, the goal of this month is to highlight and raise awareness about mental health challenges in minority populations, promote culturally responsive care, encourage open conversations to reduce the stigma, and highlight stories and voices from diverse backgrounds. So today, you're getting involved today, but here are some other ways to get involved, right? You can host or attend a community event or a workshop, and then this is for next year. Share educational resources and personal stories, advocate for equitable access to care and policy change, and support or volunteer with organizations like NAMI Mental Health America, the Steve Fund, North Carolina Families United, any organization you would like to support, right? But those are just a little bit of the quick facts of why we celebrate this month, why we want to highlight it, and the importance of it. So I know I said that we would have two speakers today. Unfortunately, one of our speakers had something that came up last minute. But if we have time at the end of the webinar, we are going to share a video from her that she was able to get to us this morning. But we do have Miss Alexxis Graham here, and I'm going to give her her introduction, and then I'm just going to let her have the floor, and we should have time for questions at the end. If you have any questions or any comments, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll also have, like I said, a Q&A session as long as time allows. So give me 1 second here. Technology is not being very nice to me today. Let's see. All right. Everyone is having a great day today, though. I know I am. I really love our technology. For me today, the problem really is my internet. But either way, let's see. Yeah, thank you, Miss Natasha. You gotta love Outlook. All right. Well, Miss Alexxis, if you want to go ahead and bring yourself on camera and pull your presentation up, that'll be just fine.
I sure can. All right. Can you see that, Cameron? Or can
Alexxis, I
anyone
can
else
see
see
it.
that?
Yeah,
Okay,
you are
thank you,
good.
Heather. I was going to say, maybe I shouldn't have
Yes,
asked Cameron. I'm
yes.
sorry.
Yes.
All right. First of all, Alexxis, did you hear me?
I
I
did.
know
I
I
can
was
go ahead
cutting
and
in
get
and out,
started.
but Heather, she didn't hear me. If you can let her know.
Yep, I can go ahead and get started.
All right.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Cameron, for convening me today. I appreciate all of the laying of the groundwork that you did relating to statistics, because what I hope to do, as Cameron mentioned, is encourage a conversation and share information around a broadened perspective around bridging community care and community wisdom, centering Black, Indigenous, people of color, healing practices in mental health work, and what that actually means. So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about myself. I'll lay the groundwork, and then I'm a very interactive presenter. So I do hope that you all are comfortable coming off of mute and interacting via the chat to give us some conversation today, right? Around some of these things that I'm going to talk about, and if you've heard them or if you utilize them yourself, and how you feel about that. And in the same sentiments that Cameron mentioned, we will for sure have a Q&A portion at the end of this. This is not at all a long or exhaustive presentation, but just one to open the door for us to have more explorative conversations and hopefully encourage you in your practice or in your professionalism or in your personal life as a Black, Indigenous, or person of color to incorporate some of these aspects into your mental health work and wellness. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome and intentions. What we have here is a land acknowledgement in the state of North Carolina and South Carolina. We may have some folks from South Carolina here. I want to acknowledge that we are gathered here on ancestral lands of the Catawba, Cherawa, Sugaree, Wateree, and Waxhaw people. And when recognizing that the enduring legacy of these tribes and profound impact of colonization on their communities, we express our gratitude for their stewardship of this land and commit to supporting their continued presence and well-being. We acknowledge the historical injustices faced by Indigenous people and commit to learning from their wisdom and working towards a more just and equitable future. It was very important for me to include this land acknowledgement in having this conversation around minority mental health wellness and Black Indigenous persons of color, because Indigenous persons once occupied this land, as well as many ancestral enslaved persons. So just want to get you all know that we're setting the intention for the space to be very inclusive, to be very conversational. My hope today is that you share what you care about, you leave the space with some new learnings, and hopefully you're encouraged. So a little bit about me. I am a licensed mental health counselor, associate in North Carolina and in South Carolina. I have a decade of experience supporting individuals and families through trauma, transitions, emotional challenges. My foundation is in conflict resolution and peer support and community counseling, and I am very intentional about including trauma-informed care and somatic practices with the persons that I work with. I The integrated systems model is one that I often come from in working with the majority of my individuals and children. And I think we're going to see a lot of that play out here in conversation. So feel free, you'll have this to digest a little bit deeper if you wish afterward, because you'll have this presentation to go home with, hopefully. So just some grounding. I know that it is, as Cameron stated, the end of the month, and it's almost the middle of the workday. So I have a breathwork activity here. I do not want to, forcefully have everyone walk through it. I love making space for folks to take things at their own pace. So I want to acknowledge that we have a breathwork activity here for folks who may have already had a pretty heightened day and need to take a moment and ground and set the intentions for their presence in this meeting. Feel free to follow steps 1, 2, and 3 on the screen, relating to breathing in and out of your nose steadily and doing a short count of 1 through 5. And doing that repetitively once or twice for you to feel comfortable and grounded and be present for the presentation, if that will help you level set. And I also want to offer some norms for the space. I like to be very intentional about agreements and coming into very vulnerable conversations with folks by hoping that we can all come together and honor all stories that are shared with cultural humility and confidentiality, and acknowledge that what's said here stays here, and that what is learned here will leave here. So hopefully we can walk away with those things and feel very comfortable in sharing and being present with one another. Good to go? Let me check the chat just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat, so let's go ahead. So let's talk a little bit about what counts as healing. Thank you, Heather. What counts as healing? This will be the first slide that I am going to call in some voices. So let's reframe what evidence-based means. In the scientific, therapeutic, and counseling space, evidence-based means that there are a set of practices or rules or methodologies that are done and practiced with intention because there is a set of scientific evidence backing them. A lot of times in the conversations that are had relating to evidence-based practices and historically, tradition, oral tradition, spiritual practices, religion, movement, and storytelling are left out of those, which is oftentimes a part of Black ancestral, Indigenous, and varying persons of color's life and lineage. It's a moment where community knowledge may outshine clinical tools, oftentimes in the mental health space. And exploring what evidence-based means is an opportunity for us as Black, because I am a Black African-American woman who has my own lineage of ancestral practices and things that I believe in and things that I was taught as a young girl, as well as religious practices and spiritual practices that I like to bring to the counseling space, right? And oftentimes doing that may be difficult. It may be challenging. Walking into the clinical space as a therapist who has a therapist and who had a therapist before she was a therapist, you want to find someone who aligns with your views, your personal values, and what you believe in. And when you go into the space, having someone who you know is like the authority per se, or the one with the most knowledge and experience here, it may be challenging for you to bring in some of those oral traditions or spiritual practices or even your religion. Oftentimes, I think folks look for, I've heard people look for, Christian counselors, right? But I wonder what it looks like for us to look for other types of um, practitioners, such as therapists or counselors that help us explore what counts as healing and challenge what exactly evidence-based things mean when we're talking about methodology. So I want to invite folks in to answer the question, what types of healing practices did your family or community pass down that you value today, or that you may have even incorporated in your therapeutic process if you've been in therapy? Heather has dropped in that everyone's mic is now available. So feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Yeah, I welcome you to unmute and come on in. Yeah, M. Henson.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just wanted to thank you for this session today. Oh my gosh.
Hi.
I didn't know I was coming up beside you. That's so funny. I've never seen that before. But I just wanted to thank you for this session today so that we can gather more information. I want to say specifically, I love the fact that this is geared towards the African American community and mental health. It's something that I've had to learn and advocate for myself for quite some time. So this right now, what I'm doing is a part of my healing journey. I'm a homeschool mom of two. I'm also a costume designer. I do special effects makeup. Sometimes I'm a fairy and a clown, depending on who's hiring their birthday party for face painting. But those are things that I do to heal myself. I'm going to drop down because I know I can talk now, but thank you so much, everybody.
No, thank you so much for coming and speaking, right, about what you feel is an untraditional way of healing yourself, right? Outside of what the scientific or traditional evidence-based methodology might be when you walk into the therapeutic space or when you're talking about wellness or your mental health. Thank you so much for being vulnerable with us. Does anyone else want to potentially share? I would love to see another face, hear another voice. Okay, yes, I do not want to mispronounce your name, but Triana Miles, absolutely. Did I get it right? Perhaps. Feel free to come off mute and join us. Let's see. Oh, it won't allow you to unmute. Can I unmute you? Let's see if I can. At least I got your name right. I'm happy for that. Okay, I can't unmute you. Heather, by chance, can we unmute Triana?
Yeah, I have enabled her mic. I actually don't have one like a thing on my end where it allows me to unmute a participant.
Okay.
I only have the the capability of muting
Okay,
someone.
I might be thinking.
But if she would, if it's a short, if she would like to type it out in the chat, we could definitely
Yeah,
share that
I was going to
out loud
say,
for her
Triana,
as
if
well.
you want to give it to me in the chat, I will voice it over if you can't get off mute for us, for sure. Self-love counts as healing. Self-love absolutely counts as healing. I want to acknowledge understanding your value as well. Yes. Self-love, understanding your value, self-esteem, acknowledging and working on that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Triana. I think that in going into your healing spaces and those conversations with your practitioners, depending on what you want to talk about, those things actually come up very, very easily. Accepting that you have to let them, who's the them, Triana? Is the them you? Is the them external folks to you? Do what they need and choose to do? Others in general? External folks. Okay. Yep. Folks external to us, allowing folks, recognizing that everyone has a choice. Everyone gets to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And all we have is control over what? Self. Okay, thank you guys so much for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about, and feel free to add in some additional comments for those who didn't want to come off mute. Feel free to add your comments to the chat. As I said, I'm a very engaged and interaction-based speaker and facilitator. Love doing these types of workshops and conversations and get folks talking and just moving in the space. So let's talk a little bit about cultural disconnects in traditional therapy. When it comes to some of the statistics that Cameron spoke about in level setting us for this conversation today, a lot of that, as she mentioned, happens due to the cultural disconnects in traditional therapy. The history of mental health and psychological based care in the United States, and I'm solely going to talk about the United States here, is not one of being inclusive to Black, Indigenous persons, or other persons of color. We were often excluded from the psychological care and mental health support services that were needed for us, due to a multitude of reasons, including slavery, right? Including mental health institutional hospitals, women. I want to also bring in sexism at that. Is at the traditional base of care in the United States. So when we're coming into the 21st century, and more importantly 2025, and we're seeing the burst of Black clinicians, we're seeing other persons of color and additional traditions, clinicians, come into the space in a non-traditional way, bringing their traditions and their perspectives. And we have people across the country looking for clinicians and therapists that look like them. We start to bridge the gap between the cultural disconnects in therapy. So, not unknown to all, common clinical models lack resonance with Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Interventions without context is a concern, a deep concern, an avid part of clinical training and our continuing education. And hopefully, right, you get some clinicians that are very intentional and very prescriptive about how they include cultural context in their cognitive behavioral therapy intervention methodology, or their solution focus or dialectical behavioral therapy models, right? There's often been a historical knowledge and experiences by persons of color where collectivism has been pathologized incorrectly, or spirituality has been pathologized, incorrectly, and leads to improper diagnosing and improper treatment, or concern where concern does not need to be driven, or medication where medication may not need to be driven for the persons based off of their cultural connection to their mental wellness and habits. Just to give an example, right, of what that looks like, because I feel like I was using a couple of big terms. I've experienced, I've had folks come to me and they have a tradition in their family of being very family centric and very family centered. So I'll have an individual that'll come forth and say, I'm in therapy, but my mom and my father do not know that I'm here. They will not agree with me being here, because in our family, we handle things within our family. We have cultural councils, we have family councils where we meet and we discuss and we converse what our challenges are and how to move through those things. And oftentimes I feel excluded from that. And I feel like this may be a space where I can get my concerns addressed or have my mental health be attended to, right? And in times like that, with someone who maybe doesn't have or understand the cultural context or the desire to dive deeper with that person and say, so tell me a little bit more about these dynamics, and if it will be helpful for you to bring some of those family members into this space, right, during some of our sessions, what that looks like. Just for an example, right? again, impacts misdiagnosis. Mixed diagnosis, I think, are common things here in the social age of social media and prominent just social pop culture. If there are any clinicians on the line, this may resonate with you, but you hear folks use language like, oh, they're a narcissist, or I have OCD, or I have all of these things, right? It's very common in pop culture for those things to be discussed, but true misdiagnosis in the clinical space is harmful. We know that that is harmful and oftentimes has the ability to be weaponized against Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. It also develops mistrust. It develops mistrust in the healthcare space. It develops mistrust in the mental wellness space. And folks will drop out. They will disengage. They will stop coming to therapy. They'll say, I tried it once and I don't want to try it again. I had someone who wasn't open to my cultural context, that wasn't open to understanding my family system, that wasn't open to understanding my true values and beliefs and how I interpreted those in the clinical space. And that made me not want to show up. So, just to give and do the full wraparound of what we previously were talking about what healing can look like and kind of trying to break the mold, just wanted to give you guys some real life examples of what cultural disconnects in traditional therapy show up as, right? So let's talk about what community wisdom looks like in practice and what it can look like for you as a person coming to therapy with your wisdom culturally or your cultural values and practice, bringing those things, or what it looks like as you as a clinician being on the receiving end of some of these conversations. So what community wisdom could look like in practice, right? It can look like storytelling, excuse me for my blunders today, storytelling and oral histories, doing like timeline activities or legacy exploration to understand your family system, some of the, what do they call it? Your health history when you go into your doctor's office and when you complete those intake forms with your clinician or your therapist and they say, do you have a history of any of these conditions in your family? It's very important for clinicians to know also mental health history, right? Do you have bipolar disorder that runs in your family? Is there a history of depression, anxiety? Is there a history of histrionic behavior? And oftentimes, in some instances, we don't talk about those. We just have the uncle or the cousin or the family friend that's actually your auntie or whomever that has something actually clinically prevalent in terms of a behavior that may need intervention and support. But because of care systems, distrust in healthcare, and so forth on, may not actually have a diagnosis, but you seeing some of those behaviors become prevalent in yourself may make you desire to seek clinical intervention. So even being as casual as saying, I don't know that we have a history of this, but, this is what I see, this is what I know, and these are concerns for me, could be great ways for folks to pull through some of the data or information that comes from legacy exploration and life timeline activities. Spiritual rituals, so bringing forth the community wisdom of your spirituality and those rituals such as grounding sessions, ancestral reflection, prayer, and integration with consent into the therapeutic space may be very helpful in getting your client or yourself to be open and vulnerable in the clinical space. Having the confidence and courage to come forth to your clinician and as a clinician be open to allowing yourself to be centered in some of these practices with your patients can be extremely helpful, not just for your wisdom and their wisdom, but in practice their wellness, right? Somatic movement and other movement practices, this is becoming a large phenom. I feel like in the past 5 years of walking, I used to do back in 2016, 27, what I called walk and talk sessions with some of my patients down in Florida. It was a great way to get folks out of the traditional boxed office setting, right? Having the 2-chair dynamic can often feel cramped, it can feel trapped, it can make people feel very unnerved and uneasy about becoming vulnerable. So introducing something like that could be extremely helpful, as well as being mindful of when folks are anxious and doing breath work or some type of drumming or, somatic exercise to get folks working through those traumas by way of you having been trained and learning those practices specifically. And then there's also trauma-informed yoga, right? We see yoga things popping up. I know here, I'm out of Gastonia, North Carolina, not too far from Charlotte, but I see consistently a lot of yoga sessions popping up via the Gant Museum or other clinicians and yoga practitioners just saying, hey, here's a trauma-informed session. I have this expertise. This is great, right? Doing something like that for the community as a clinician or as a potential patient going to something like that could be extremely helpful, right? And a learned opportunity. And then lastly, collective or intergenerational care. So this is where our LMFTs or licensed marriage and family therapists come into play, where we're talking about family sessions, integrating some of those storytelling or oral histories and bringing those folks into the room that may not have initially wanted to be in the room, but you're going through your healing practice and you want to bring them along. Or you just as a family have agreed, we're going to do family therapy, having family sessions, doing elder interviews, talking to one another in those group processing spaces that are safe for your family. And I'm not talking about just a general processing group or support group, but intentional sessions that are for family and collective sharing can be very helpful. And those are just some of the ways in which community wisdom may show up in practice. I want to pause here and ask if anyone has engaged in any of these things that they may have found helpful or did not, in fact, find helpful that they may want to share about. Is there anyone that I can call into the space, perhaps? Or drop into the chat if you don't want to come off mute or can't come off mute. I'll share myself. I've done, again, those walk and talk sessions, and I for sure have done some trauma-informed yoga. Okay, I see M. Henson has done some spiritual rituals before. Very refreshing, grounding, and ancestral work. Absolutely. Absolutely. And did you find those to be helpful as well, the grounding and ancestral work? Feel free to come off mute. I now see the hand raised if you feel comfortable. Yeah.
So I can say specifically with grounding, I need to be able to do it more.
Okay.
But what I've been noticing is genuinely from the journey that has gotten me here today, trying to calm my nervous system after what I've been through is very difficult for me. And that's something that I'm trying to really, really gain control over so that I can stand in my power again. So that's something I'm working on. But ancestral work, it's something that I've been researching for a while. And with that, working with my ancestors on all different types of levels. So, for example, I'm in my 30s, but I know technology more than a lot of older family members. So I take that and I document photos that have been passed down from generations. I have photos of my grandfather's father when he was a child, and of course, slavery was a lifestyle that they had to live. And so I should have document those things. And we do 23andMe, I think it's called, and ancestry.com. So those are two of the forms that I do use.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. I resonate with that personally. My family is very intentional. I have a couple of folks on the call today supporting me, but they've been very intentional about making sure that I know my lineage. Let me be clear about that. And then that we know historically just where where our ancestors are from, where the folks who've come before me are from, the different places they've occupied in the US, right? My family, we were so fortunate to have gone to the Legacy Museum this past Juneteenth and learn a little bit more about our legacy, right? And that type of grounding and informed help, excuse me, not help, but support of like being able to pull some of my family together to do that was extremely impactful and helpful to my personal wellness. And I think, you know, my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, who we were all able to come together, it helped us familial wise, right? Feel a lot more comfortable talking through some things. So yeah, community wisdom shapes up all over. It shapes up very differently for all of us. But I just want to call in, you know, I hear you saying that you're working on some of those things. I know that finding a clinician sometimes that is revered in some of those things can be challenging as well. But I encourage folks in trying and doing some of those consultations with their clinicians to ask the questions of, do you have a familiarity with this? If you don't, are you open to exploring like what it looks like for me to get healing in a different way, right? A less traditional way, just so that you have support and you're not carrying that and regulating your system on your own. Community wisdom is just that, community. It requires a multitude of persons to support our wisdom and our care for ourselves. So thank you so much for sharing that. I hope you guys didn't mind my little self-disclosure there. So let's talk about some ethical and practical considerations for counselors. Cultural humility versus cultural appropriation. When I mentioned getting the training to do the trauma-informed yoga, getting the training to do the somatic practices, being trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, being trained in Reiki practices, being trained as a Christian therapist and having gone to divinity school and having all of those things under your belt helps you be culturally competent and practice cultural humility versus appropriating someone else's cultural reverence or practice and values, right? Being uninformed is not the best way to help our patients or those we are in community with. And it can be quite offensive. Like the bottom line, it's offensive, it's harmful, and it can create that distrust. It can, you know, have folks not interested in figuring out how to be mentally well. That I'll figure it out myself, right? So you know, when you're going in, whether you are the counselor, I feel like I spoke a lot from the counselor lens, but as a patient going in and trying to find someone, knowing the questions to ask, you know, or figuring out what kind of questions to ask someone in a consultation is extremely helpful to trying to find the right fit and doing your 1 and 2 sessions with that person to tease out if it's a good fit for you. Also, consent, client defined boundaries, and client as the expert model. When we're talking about some of these cultural practices that are to be integrated into sessions and led by the client and introduced by the client, consent, asking, informed consent, all very helpful, right? When I say, you know, someone's telling you, oh, my family wouldn't appreciate me being here, but I want to be here, and saying, do you want to explore a little bit about that family system, that family dynamic? And if we want to potentially introduce, that's asking for consent to explore that boundary with them around something very fragile that impacts their whole system wellness, not just their individual, but whole system wellness. Because we know, I'm pretty sure I see a couple of folks with a couple of letters behind their names on here, but going into a system as a changed person that has not been impacted or informed of the changes that you've gone through, you kind of get a little re-traumatized sometimes. You have to assimilate and acclimate back to things that you've done a little bit of growth around, and that can be hurtful and harmful, right? So figuring out what that looks like is very important. The client defined boundaries, allowing the client to lead on what the cultural integration looks like, the grounding, the conversations around the ancestral components, around the indigenous practices and components, right? And then I think the evident part of the client as the expert They're setting the boundaries. They're informing, what we're moving through here. You, of course, are bringing your clinical expertise. You're bringing the cultural training and personal knowledge. If you have the same cultural background as them, you're bringing that into the space as much as permitted, right? But letting the client lead on that. And then collaborating with traditional healers, doulas, spiritual clergy, um, pastors. I think the person who was supposed to be here to speak with us as well, she has, that background, peer leaders. In collaborating with those folks when you're hosting like community events, maybe not so much in the one-to-one clinical space, but when you're hosting community events or when you're having community conversations that are really in depth, or when you're doing the yoga and you want someone who practices like a very specific type for a specific reason or outcome in a healing journey or practice, doing that type of collaboration can be extremely helpful. And then being sure to discuss what is in scope versus what is in partnership. And that those are very operational terms. I want to apologize for that now, but I do want to give the context of it's a practical consideration for a counselor to recognize what's within their scope of practice as a clinician that they can help their client with when it comes to traditional therapy and non-traditional therapy. What's in partnership? If your client is like, I do not expect for you to know all of these things. I am going to be the owner of the knowledge, and this is just like things that I hold on to as I move through the space. That's something, you have a conversation with if you're under any type of clinical supervision or with a colleague about, to ensure that it's in partnership and it's in scope. So just a little background knowledge, right, to help color everyone's lenses when it comes to what's ethical and practical in being helpful and not harmful in treating Black, Indigenous people of color. So let's reflect, right? This is another point of interaction. Is there a current or past client for those of us that are clinicians on the space? Or if you are a client that has received treatment, right? How has community rooted wisdom helped shape your healing path or the person you are supporting's healing path? If you do community based events, how have the ways in which you garnered community, right, and held community spaces for others helped healing paths be different? I think that this is an opportunity that I would like to call folks in so that we can get some testimony of understanding around non-traditional ways in which we show up that still are very helpful in the mental health and clinical space. Does anyone have any thoughts or contributions that could be helpful to the conversation? Thank you so much, Heather, for dropping that in there. Feel free to come off mute. I don't know why I'm not seeing like the hand raises come to me on the front end, but feel free to come off mute or drop into the chat, and I can for sure read that aloud.
Well, Alexis, this is Cameron.
Yeah,
While everybody's gathering their thoughts, I'll just come off and share.
yeah.
So I think since we have been doing these monthly webinars since about December, November of last year, um,
Okay.
and each month, we try to consider the observance of what that month is trying to, honor. But just by being intentional and having intentional webinars and intentional speakers, I've seen how impactful it actually is. Last month we were able to have a Men's Health Month panel,
Oh,
and it was
nice.
just, yeah, it was amazing to be able to see the men, open up to each other, fellowship with each other, be supportive, and also be very vulnerable in that space. For people to see, for people to relate to and grow. So I just think for me personally, and even this webinar, It's just been amazing to see how targeted, information and even just support can really do a lot for people. So
Yeah.
that's been impactful for me within this past year.
Thank you so much, Cameron, for sharing that. And thank you for providing, like, being a facilitator to provide the space, you and Heather. Like, this is extremely amazing to be able to be in this space. Um, I see a couple of folks on my screen, right? I see Reese, I see Arita, I see Marco, I see Tia, Sonia. Anyone want to speak
Hi
to
there.
anything? Yeah, perhaps?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So I just want to thank you for this webinar. It's amazing to be able to come into a space where it's a BIPOC community. The organization I work for is BIPOC, so we serve, you know, that aspect of the community. Being a Latin present, being Latin and showing up. I feel and I hope that can open up doors, to questions and have someone of my representation being there and then seeing me
Mhm.
to give them that hope that, I deal a lot with individuals that are misplaced and substance use, so and mental health. So,
Yeah.
I want them to know and feel that it's comfortable to be able to talk about it and not keep it in, in the Latin and I'm sure in BIPOC community we're taught to keep everything in and not say anything. And you know, you don't want to carry that. It's a lot of trauma. So being able to do this kind of work and the the journey that I've been on, and learning more about my Latin culture for so long, I was so close to it. So right now I'm going through the journey of you know what my ancestors were of healing doctors and which they're called curanderas and
Mhm.
curanderos. Being able to be a part of that journey has been a healing process for me to really know my culture. So it's been great.
Yeah, that listen, Marco. There's an ask if for you to put up your links if you are comfortable for where you work and the folks that you support. So please do first, Marco. And two, thank you so much for coming off and sharing that. Um, During COVID, I had the privilege of working very closely with the Latinx community in South Carolina. And forgive me, I actually think Latinx is an outdated reference to the Latino community. However, I think historically, what you just mentioned about it's important for me to show up at work every day so that people see someone that looks like me and know that they can feel comfortable through this journey of displacement, through the struggles of substance use, through the struggles of mental health, that I am someone that looks like them, that they can confide in, is just a historical unfortunate circumstance of belief that I think a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color in America face. And personally, I feel like it goes back to this idea of seen, not heard when it comes to our presence and existence in the United States. So much of our emotional reverence in certain circumstances has been told to be quiet, kept together. When it came to folks being different than the norm, they were hidden. So I love the fact that we are in these helping spaces now and that we acknowledge and understand that our presence means so much to the communities that we're contributing to. Thank you so much, Marco. Um, Anyone else? Feel free to drop your contact information in the chat. Um, Yes, I can absolutely. My contact information is also in this presentation, which I think will be shared to you guys. So I don't have it to drop into the chat. It will be in this presentation for you to grab in just a moment. But thank you guys so much. If you have any professional or contact information to share and network into this, please drop that in the chat so that other folks can know who to turn to in community. That's also something that's revered here. Being able to call up someone who has a different level of understanding, a different perspective, a different level of expertise that you can call into and say, hey, can I get some counsel here? Extremely, extremely helpful. So let's get on to this. So yeah, I'm actually wrapping up here and I see we only have a couple of minutes. Fantastic. So just some takeaways and then a lovely podcast that I think could be very helpful. Decolonizing therapy and healing is an entire practice in and of itself. There is a lovely podcast that I've linked at the bottom of here that you all will be able to access. And I'll make sure that I get this presentation over to Cameron so that it can be shared. But 3 takeaways, right, as we close out and wrap up here. Community wisdom is, in fact, clinical wisdom. Clinicians function, exist to help and support community. Whether you're doing individual therapy, family systems therapy, group therapy, you are supporting the community. Culturally rooted healing practices such as storytelling, rituals, and collective care complement evidence-based practices, and when integrated with intention and cultural humility, absolutely bring forth change in our respective community and to those who occupy it. Client-defined healing builds trust and relevance. So when we invite clients to define what healing means to you, right? I think it was M. Hinton who shared, like, for me, sometimes it's dressing up as a clown, sometimes it's dressing up as, whatever character I'm being asked to, that is healing for me. In a traditional sense, someone may go, now how is that healing? But that's what healing means to her. And it's important that she's able to define that and that she is able to go forth and express that and receive and be supported through her healing journey with any intentional asks of support based on what she is defining as her healing, right? Ethical integration requires collaboration and not appropriation. Again, this goes back to those community practices and integrating those things through relationship building, which is, thank you for dropping your information into the chat. It is through relationship building. We are building relationships through consent, through partnership with our clients, through partnerships with our community, and not by co-opting people's traditions. We are not co-opting people's culture. We are not making that our own just because we've helped someone one time who is of Haitian descent. Now, I am, all-knowing in those. That is not at all what we are doing. What we are doing is providing culturally relevant care ethically and integrating by way of the client's consent their practices and desires. So I'm hoping that you all have walked away with, from my presentation, some lovely information, some information relating to minority mental health, Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color's values, and what it can look like to integrate their care and support here. So thank you guys so much for everyone who shared, everyone who thought of sharing but did not feel comfortable to come off. Know that you are seen too, because I have been there. And thank you guys just for holding space for me in this opportunity. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Cameron. We have another share out here. I will stop sharing my screen. And yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Miss Alexxis. That was amazing. If you guys have any questions or anything, go ahead and place them in the chat. You can raise your hand, come off mute, questions, comments, anything like that. But to end our webinar here, we are just going to share a short video that Miss Normandy, who our other speaker who couldn't make it today, was able to put together just to share a little bit about herself and what she does with her work. And then, like we said, we will share this presentation. You can also access it on our website, and our YouTube channel as well. Miss Heather, if you don't mind, because like I said, I'm on my phone, if you're able to pull that video up and share it with our participants. And Miss Normandy will tell a little bit about herself here, and like I said, and just what she does. And then I hope that you guys have an amazing day. I'm so, 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 so thankful for Miss Alexxis and Miss Normandy and Heather and everybody just to make this webinar uh, possible. And just look out for our upcoming webinars. We do one every month. And if you would like to be a speaker, just let us know, because we always need people to speak. We want, authentic voices. We want diversity, all those type of things. So everyone have a great day, and stay for the video if you can. And thank you so much.
Can you all see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. All right. I'm playing it now.
All right. Uh-oh. Can't hear it. That's the only thing. If we can't get it to work like something, we will be able to share it out. But I want to
You guys
go.
couldn't, yeah, you can't hear it?
No.
Okay. I
make
could
sure-
probably drop it.
Yeah, drop the link in
Go
the
ahead.
chat. But I was gonna say, if you make sure with the share button, if there's like a thing for audio, just make sure you have it playing audio as well.
Oh, okay. Let's try again.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Okay, and go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Normandy
can hear
Schenck. I at least want to come in here and tell you thank you for being here and talk to you a little bit about my mental health journey. So I am a Christian. I'm saved. I believe in God. I pray. I seek after him. I'm an intercessor. I do all of those things, and I do everything unto God. I'm the owner of the Poema. My husband is Minister Jerry Schenck. We do ministry together. We also have journals, devotionals, and we talk about mental health. I'm also a mental health advocate, and I always share with some of the churches about my story and how God used me, and to even go through the moment in the process of having bipolar disorder and being diagnosed with that, but also knowing and trusting and seeking God. So one of the things that I talk about is in Psalms 40:1. It talks about how he pulls us out of a miry clay and he takes us out of the pit. And that is one thing that I always talk about, because sometimes, even like David, he went through things in his life, but God used him. He was a person after God's own heart. And even those things that I went through, even the things and the sins that I've committed and asked for forgiveness and repented, God still is able to use me. Even in my mental health journey, in my mental illness journey, I have been medicine free for over 7 years, where I'm able to show and help others and how God healed me. And to know that even though I've been in the hospital, committed myself to the hospital so that I will not commit suicide, how God still uses me. I have been on medication, and I tell people, if you need to go be on medication, it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek help in the process of anything that you're going through. But even those times where I haven't been on medication, I still have those moments, but I still continue to seek God. One of the things that I talk about, even in my book called Mental Health Unmasked, it talks about my journey, but it's also a devotional of how to seek God, how you can experience trauma, even about my story and the things that I went through, and how even having traumatic experiences like with losing a job, having to sell my house in a short sale. I talk about those things, and even giving a car back to the bank as some of the things that I talk about in my journey. But even to know that even though you can lose everything, that I still had to accept the situations and the things that I was going through at that time. But God restores, and he is restoring. So no matter what situation you're going through, even material things may mean a lot to us. Sometimes we can go through a spirit of pride, and God has to pull us out of that spirit, and we have to know how to seek and ask for help. I was very prideful. I didn't want anybody helping me. And if I would have asked for help sooner, then things would have been a little bit different. In this aspect of going ahead and seeking God and who to ask for help for, even when it comes to seeing a therapist, seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a counselor, you have to seek God of who is for you. Everyone is not going to be for you, and some people can be against you, but some people are not assigned to you. So that's one thing that we also have to know and to understand. Even now, I see still a therapist, and so blessed and grateful that I do, because even though I have not been on medication, I still have situations and I still have things that are going on in my life, but also not just in my life, but even in my mind. And that's the first thing the enemy attacks, is our mind. And you think about, my aunt had shared with me one time, she said Jesus was crowned with thorns on his head, and that's the first thing the enemy attacks, is our mind. But even through that process, God restores. We can go through a state of depression, but you have a choice and have a decision to be pulled out of that state of depression. John 8 and 6 and 38. This is one thing I talk about. John 6, 8 and 36. I was like, I gotta get that scripture right. When you get the sixes and the eights. It says, therefore, if the Son makes you free, you are free indeed. And this is also something that me and my husband work on. This is a journal devotional activity book. It is called Break Free from Depression. All these can be found on Amazon. But the reason why this one was created was to bring positive aspects, positive words that you can say to yourself that I am loved, I am healed, I am renewed, I'm restored. And also in that, I love to color. Even as a grown woman, I love to color. And coloring was a release for me. It was a coping skill. Writing was a release for me. Writing in my journal, getting all my thoughts on paper to help me through the process of knowing that I am healed and I can be restored so my mind will not be racing. So an activity book, it has word searches in there, it has different things and activities that you can do for yourself. But knowing, even as a Christian and trusting and believing God, we always have the assumption, just pray about it. But we have to pray about it. Everything that we need is in the Word of God. But God also God gives us wisdom, and He gives us the will to need and go get the help that we need. And the resources are available for us. So use them. Use them to the best ability that you know how. And I pray that this will be a blessing to you, and that it will speak to your heart and speak to your spirit. And I pray that God will do something new for you on today as you can get your healing and being whole in everything that He needs for you. God bless you. Bye, you guys.
All right. That was an awesome video. Like I said, this stuff will be available, and be looking for Miss Normandy to have her speak in the future, and Miss Alexxis will definitely be back as long as she will have us. But you guys have a great, amazing day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.